Welcome to today's Explainer. We're diving into something today that, frankly, kind of rewrites the rules on how we navigate our daily lives. We are exploring the architecture of irony. I want you to think about your default human instincts for a second. Usually, when you want something, what do? You chase it. When you're afraid of something, you run the other way. I mean, it seems perfectly logical, right? But what if those default, deeply ingrained instincts are actually producing the exact opposite of what you want? Over the next few minutes, we're going to unpack 15 profound life paradoxes that absolutely prove the path to what you desire is very often the complete reverse of what you'd intuitively expect.
Okay, let's jump right in and make sure we're completely aligned on the core mechanism of today's explainer. A paradox is formally defined as a seemingly absurd or contradictory statement or proposition, which, when investigated, may prove to be well-founded or true. Honestly, think of it like a glitch in the matrix of logic. At first glance, it sounds entirely wrong, maybe even a bit ridiculous. But when you actually test it out in the real world, it turns out to be this hidden truth holding everything together. It's kind of the universe's way of keeping us all on our toes.
And that leads us to the ultimate hook for our journey today. I want you to really genuinely ask yourself this. Are your natural instincts actually working against you? Think deeply about how you navigate friction in your day-to-day life. Are your totally normal reactions to failure, to relationships, to the crazy pressures of the modern world, are they actively sabotaging your long-term goals? To figure this out, we're going to group these philosophical ironies into the major arenas of life, starting with the one we battle with the most, ourselves.
Section 1. The irony of personal growth. Why the hard path is the right path. Consider this simple comparison that we fight literally every single day. We just naturally assume that the more we fail, the further behind we fall. But the paradox reveals that the more you fail, the more likely you actually are to succeed. I know, our absolute primary instinct, both biologically and socially, is to avoid failure at all costs. We view it as this massive step backward, a permanent stain on our record. Yet those early mistakes, the stumbles, the embarrassing missteps, they aren't roadblocks at all. They're actually the exact raw materials required to build success. You literally have to fail your way forward to build any kind of meaningful resilience.
And this brilliantly illustrates three super counterintuitive truths about our personal growth. First up, fear isn't always a stop sign. Actually, very often, it's a compass pointing straight toward the exact thing you need to overcome. Second, the beautiful humility of education is that the more you learn, the more you realize you have an immense amount left to learn. Getting smarter doesn't bring absolute certainty. It just expands the perimeter of what you don't know. And finally, leaning into the heavy lifting and struggling early on reliably creates an easier, lighter future. You pay the toll now, or you pay it with interest later.
To cap off our look at personal growth, we have to talk about the ultimate trap of the ego. The more a person is completely convinced they are right, the more likely they actually are to be wrong. When we close ourselves off to alternative ideas and just lock into our own absolute certainty, we're actively blinding ourselves to nuance and to reality. We essentially build this impenetrable echo chamber. Overconfidence isn't a strength, folks. It's a massive vulnerability. True, sustainable personal growth strictly requires an open mind, not a closed fist.
So, if we are naturally getting our own internal growth entirely backward, what happens when we try to connect with other people? Why do forced relationships fail so spectacularly? We have all been there, right? Trying to jam a puzzle piece into the entirely wrong spot. Keep this dynamic in the back of your mind as we shift our focus from our internal selves to our outward interpersonal interactions.
Section 2. The paradox of human connection. Navigating relationships backward.
So the crucial point here, and it's a tough one, is that the more you actively try to make people like you, the less they probably will. Just think about the quiet desperation of people-pleasing. When you're intensely trying to manufacture affection or get approval, it always comes across as inauthentic. And humans, we have a sixth sense for that kind of pressure. By desperately chasing likability and contorting your personality to fit a mold, your natural instinct is actively repelling the genuine connection you are so desperately looking for. True magnetism requires just a little bit of not caring.
Let's systematically break this down. Notice the direct, unbreakable correlation between your inner state and your relationship outcomes. To have a happy, functioning relationship, you first have to be perfectly happy completely by yourself. You absolutely cannot rely on someone else to fix your fundamental unhappiness. On top of that, if you attempt to force a relationship into existence, you're highly likely to just mess it up. Pressure shatters fragile bonds. The anchor to this whole thing is self-acceptance. The more you genuinely love yourself, the more capable you become of loving others. A healthy outward connection is literally impossible without a healthy inward foundation.
Now, this next one requires some deep, perhaps really uncomfortable self-reflection. The more you vehemently hate a specific trait in other people, the more likely it is that you are actively avoiding that exact same trait in yourself. Psychologists call this mirroring or projecting. It stings a little bit, doesn't it? The behaviors that absolutely infuriate us about our peers or our colleagues are very often the things we are deeply insecure about or maybe subconsciously suppressing within our own minds. The outside world is frequently just a giant mirror reflecting our internal unresolved issues.
We're going to wrap up our human connection segment with this really striking quote. The more honest you are about your faults, the more people will think you are perfect. Just think about the immense amount of energy we burn trying to hide our flaws, completely terrified that they make us unlovable or weak. But the beautiful paradox is that vulnerability, transparency, and simply owning your messy imperfections are exactly what draw people to you. Perfection is cold, it's intimidating, and it's inherently fake. Honesty, on the other hand, is warm, relatable, and it acts as the ultimate connective tissue between us.
Let's move to Section 3 and see how this builds. The illusion of certainty, how modern life tricks us. Here is the great modern irony staring us right in the face literally every time we open a screen. The more digitally connected we become with the world, the more deeply isolated we seem to feel. We have never in human history possessed more technology designed specifically to link us together, yet this endless digital closeness often entirely lacks actual human depth. It leaves us feeling completely alone while standing in a crowded digital room. The sheer quantity of our connections has skyrocketed, but it has simultaneously cannibalized the rich quality of our real-world relationships.
And here is another vicious trap of the modern era. The more options you have, the less satisfied you will be with whichever one you finally choose. We naturally, instinctively, think that having infinite choices is going to guarantee the absolute best outcome. But hoarding choices just leads to immense cognitive load and decision paralysis. When you finally pick one path out of 1,000, you spend the rest of your time wondering about the 999 paths you didn't take. Complete abundance actually manufactures endless, nagging dissatisfaction. Wild, right?
Which brings us to Section 4, Embracing Life's Ultimate Ironies, the Final Truths. Consider this incredibly brief but powerful statement derived from our source material. The only certainty is uncertainty. We spend our entire lives trying to engineer a sense of total control. We build rigid schedules, we buy insurance policies, and we agonize over trying to predict the future. But the ultimate paradox is that the moment you actively accept that chaos, friction, and unpredictability are the only real guarantees in life, you actually stop fighting reality. Acknowledging that you cannot control the universe is, ironically, the single fastest route to genuine peace of mind.
Now, what's really fascinating about framing our ultimate human fear this way is the sheer contrast. The less afraid you are of death, the less afraid you are to actually live. When we are entirely consumed by the fear of the end, we tend to play it incredibly safe. We hold back, we build walls, and we avoid taking the very risks that make a life worthwhile in the first place. But by confronting and bravely accepting our own mortality, we suddenly unlock the courage, the freedom, and the absolute necessity to live vividly and fully, right now in the present moment.
Well, we have covered a profound amount of ground today, completely breaking down the architecture of irony. We've seen that desperately avoiding failure actually stops our success. Relentlessly chasing likability causes our rejection, and craving absolute certainty only brings us anxiety. So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. If your default instincts are completely backwards, what will you intentionally do differently today? How will you act now that you know the hard path, the vulnerable path, and the uncertain path are actually the correct ones? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I highly encourage you to test these paradoxes in your own life this week. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll catch you on the next one.